My name is Tamisha Haywood, and I will be presenting socioeconomic factors and their influence on crime. What are socioeconomic factors? Socioeconomic factors include level of education, occupation, income, community safety, and demographics. So the question we want to ask after knowing what socioeconomic factors are is, how do socioeconomic factors affect crime? A bubble cluster, which actually presents the causes of crime, and most of them do include socioeconomic factors. So we'll start off with rapid population growth, lack of social welfare, lack of social capital, political neglect, local unemployment, higher density of offenders, high percentage of rental housing, large social housing projects, growing up in high crime area. Hypothesis. By focusing on the socioeconomic structure of crime-stricken communities, we can decrease crime. So as we move forward, we look at the conservative stance. So the conservative stance actually accepts the status quo for crime, which means that the police actually reinforce and enforce all laws, and the criminal justice system is fine just the way it is. So conservatives do believe in crime control, and they actually prefer the existing order of society, which actually is the same as the status quo. Most crime is caused by groups or individuals that are unable to succeed. They also believe that to reduce crime, there must be harsher punishments. Use of tax dollars to develop programs that address social issues or assist the general public must be avoided at all costs. So the conservative view is pretty much that if you do the crime, you do the time. They don't necessarily try to enforce social development. It's just, like I said before, the status quo and accepting that each individual makes that decision to commit crime. And if you make that decision, then the consequences will follow you. So from a liberal stance, they are more lenient and more engaged with the social development of different environments and communities. So they do believe in due process, which means fairness, making sure that everyone is treated fairly, making sure that all laws are followed thoroughly. Liberals stress psychological, social, and cultural causes of crime. They also believe that prisons and jails should focus more on rehabilitation, education, vocational training, and work and social enhancements. Structural changes do need to take place at every level of government. And liberals also believe that government intervention should work to provide affordable housing, violence intervention programs, mental health services, and educational resources. So just by comparing the liberal stance and the conservative stance, we can definitely see that liberals are definitely more for the people. They're definitely more for, like I said before, social development and creating different programs and different incentives and implications that will pretty much help develop the community and provide more resources for them. Research methods. So one of the qualitative methods that I conducted to further my research on how socioeconomic factors affect crime was by researching the social disorganization theory. So the social disorganization theory is defined as an inability of community members to achieve shared values or to solve jointly experienced problems. Social disorganization theory focuses on the characteristics of communities with high crime rates and draws on social control theory to explain why these characteristics contribute to crime. The probability of crime is said to be more likely in communities where there is economic deprivation, unstable homes, or single parent homes, high in residential mobility, and multi unit housing apartments. Areas with the lowest average socioeconomic status, which is normally urban areas, will have the greatest residential instability and ethnic diversity, which can cause social disorganization. So, here in this slide, we see how poverty, racial composition, income inequality, and mobility are connected to collective efficacy and social trust, which also leads to crime. So the disorganization, it also includes fluctuating population, significant number of families on welfare, families renting, several ethnic groups in one area, high infant mortality rates, and high levels of employment, and a large number of condemned buildings. These are all things that are composited into one community that can affect how strong the community is and their willingness to work together, which leads to social trust. And without without those things, without the willingness to work together, without the proper resources, and mobility, which pretty much relates to the in and out of the community, how rapidly people move in and out the communities, this can definitely lead to crime. The strain theory is another research method that I use to make the connection between socioeconomic factors and crime. Strain theories emphasize that specific strains or stressors can lead to negative emotions, which create pressure for corrective action. Strain theories focus on the inability to achieve conventional goals. The lack of proper resources causes a strain on individuals. And in regards to Agnew, his three categories of strain do include failure to achieve positively valued goals, removal of positive stimuli, introduction of negative stimuli. Strain often deals with the person's evaluation of a condition or an event. So this is pretty much a diagram that shows how Agnew's three categories of strain can lead to criminal behavior. And this is my connection with socioeconomic factors and crime. So, failure to achieve positively valued goals, presentation of negative stimuli, removal of positively valued stimuli, they create strain and frustration, which leads to emotions of anger or frustration and other negative emotions, which also leads to lack of legal coping mechanisms, ultimately leading to criminal behavior. Negative stimuli can be reflected as child abuse or neglect, victimization, physical punishment, negative relations with parents or peers, adverse or negative school experiences, stressful life events, and personal space violations. So, social disorganization and strain. My connection with those two theories and socioeconomic factors, I combine them because studies do show that when it comes to the involvement of serious crime, economic inequality is more important than racial inequality. Sean and McKay in 1929 found that it is not race and ethnicity that influence the involvement of crime, but rather the environment and social disorganization within the area that affected crime rates. Multiple studies have shown that the reason for high delinquency crime rates within the black population is largely due to a heavy concentration of blacks in severely economically disadvantaged neighborhoods. Research conducted by Kaufman, Rebellion, Thaxton, and Agnew represent that African Americans experience disproportionate strain in the social environment and or have fewer resources for coping with strain in conventional ways. Now, both of these studies, both of these theories, social disorganization and strain theory, do represent how socioeconomic factors can lead to crime. Both of them do represent how strain and lack of togetherness and lack of trust and lack of resources can lead to crime. Without the means to attain certain goals, different resources, educational resources, money, which is a very big issue within impoverished communities. Without those proper resources, a lot of people and a lot of individuals do seek out crime you know, um, in order to survive. So in this slide, we see how quantitative data was used in the National Longitudinal Survey of Youth in 1997 to pretty much show how socioeconomic factors did encourage crime. So this was a survey that pretty much included people born between 1980 and 1984. Respondents ranged from the age of 12 to 18 years old. There were 8,984 individuals that were interviewed. The subsample included a cross-sectional sample of 6,748 respondents designed to be representative of people living in the United States born between January 1st, 1980 and December 31st, 1984. So there was also a supplemental sample with a total of 2,236 respondents designed to oversample the Hispanic and Latino and Black people living in the United States. So the eligible youths and their parents were administered a questionnaire that covered topics such as work experience, education, work-related attitudes, labor force, and human capital issues. Through the interviews and surveys, they were able to collect data on the youth's community backgrounds to help researchers assess the impact of schooling and other environmental factors on labor markets. It also helped to determine how youth's experience relate to establishing careers, participating in government programs, and forming families. So as we can see by looking at the chart, we can see that the youths that derive from low-income families, which is represented by the turquoise color, they were more likely to engage in delinquent activities such as using marijuana, attacking someone or getting into a fight, becoming a gang member, stealing, and carrying a gun. So the low-income youths are more likely to engage in violent and property crimes than youth from middle or high-income families, which is represented by the chart above. The next slide is another study from the 2013 Annual Socioeconomic Supplement. This just shows that social indicators as shown in the figure above, which include poverty, race, and education, are a large force in determining the future of individuals affected by their socioeconomic status. We can see here that, you know, Hispanics and African Americans do make up a large portion of a large portion of the population that do come from low income and crime stricken environments. And we see that here in the chart that African Americans do make up 45% of people with less than a high school education. And just looking at numbers like that, we can definitely see that minorities are definitely affected the most by their socioeconomic factors. So based upon the research that I conducted, both quantitative and qualitative, we can see that the Economic risk, mobility, and ethnic heterogeneity are the strongest predictors of crime. Areas with lowest socioeconomic status will also have the greatest residential instability and ethnic diversity, which creates social disorganization. As recommendations, the federal agency should focus on asset building and reshaping schools, implement more community based youth intervention, improve and expand after school programs, invest in community based mental health care and treatment for substance abuse, expand the resources for social services to people with unstable housing. State and county should implement more pre-arrest diversion programs, and we should also try to implement new and creative research designs with analytical approaches to understand urban crime. These are all really good, um, really good approaches to recognizing the socioeconomic factors that do encourage crime. This is definitely more of a liberal approach versus a conservative approach. We definitely want to implement new laws and new studies that allow us to help these communities, to rehabilitate them rather than imprison them. So thank you for your time, and that's my presentation.